Ardennes Forest, December 1944. A biting wind scoured the snow-laden pines as the first American infantry patrols pushed tentatively into the German defensive lines. Their movements often silhouetted against the pale winter sky. For the concealed German snipers, positioned in their meticulously prepared hides, these initial encounters offered a grimly satisfying, yet ultimately misleading, assessment of their new adversaries. The stakes were immediate. To gauge the fighting spirit and tactical acumen of the American forces now entering the fray, replacing the often more predictable Soviets and British. Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter, a veteran sniper with 3 years on the Eastern Front, observed the advancing GIs through the 6 times magnification of his Zielfernrohr 41 scope mounted on a Karabiner 98k. His position, high in a fir tree, offered a commanding view of a narrow forest track. He noted the occasional clusters of men, their spacing often less than ideal, and the sometimes audible chatter that carried too far in the crisp air. Richter, like many of his comrades, had been trained to exploit the smallest tactical errors, and these early American formations presented numerous opportunities. The American M1 Garand, while a formidable semi-automatic rifle, was often carried with a casualness that betrayed a lack of immediate threat perception. Richter's own Karabiner 98k, a bolt-action weapon, demanded a more deliberate, almost ritualistic engagement with each shot, fostering a patience that seemed absent in the American approach. His unit's operational logs from the previous week recorded 17 confirmed kills attributed to sniper fire in this sector alone, predominantly targeting exposed forward observers and machine gun crews. This initial assessment, based on observed movement patterns and sound discipline, suggested a relative lack of battlefield sophistication. The German sniper doctrine, refined through years of attrition warfare, emphasized concealment, patience, and precise shot placement to demoralize and disrupt. They were taught to see the battlefield not as a series of engagements, but as a mosaic of vulnerabilities. The GIs, by contrast, often moved with a discernible rhythm, their patrols following predictable routes, their pauses for rest often in exposed clearings. This perceived clumsiness, while providing easy targets, also instilled a subtle, dangerous overconfidence among the German sharpshooters. Richter, having accounted for 2 American scouts that morning, felt a familiar satisfaction. The American soldiers, though well-equipped, seemed to lack the ingrained caution that defined survival on the Eastern Front. Their brightly colored unit patches and sometimes casual uniform presentation contrasted sharply with the camouflaged, almost invisible presence of his own men. This initial impression, widely shared among his company, suggested that these new opponents, while numerous, would be manageable targets. The German sniper's advantage was not merely a matter of individual skill, though that was often exceptional. It was a systemic superiority, built upon a foundation of doctrine, equipment, and a profound understanding of the battlefield. Their training regimen, far more intensive and specialized than that of their Allied counterparts in the early war years, emphasized not just marksmanship, but also fieldcraft, camouflage, and psychological warfare. Optics played a critical role in this dominance. The standard-issue German sniper rifle, often a Karabiner 98k, was typically fitted with high-quality telescopic sights manufactured by companies like Zeiss, Hensoldt, and Ajax. These scopes, offering magnifications commonly ranging from 4 to 6 times, provided exceptional clarity and light-gathering capabilities, allowing snipers to identify targets at distances where American GIs, relying on iron sights or less sophisticated optics, struggled. The etched reticles remained sharp even in low light, a stark contrast to some Allied scopes that fogged or lost definition under adverse conditions. Production logs from 1941 to 1943 reveal a consistent output of approximately 5,000 sniper scopes per month, indicating a deliberate and sustained effort to equip specialized sharpshooters. This contrasted sharply with the more ad hoc approach initially taken by the American forces, who often repurposed hunting scopes or issued a limited number of purpose-built sniper rifles. The German commitment to specialized equipment extended to rangefinders and spotting scopes, further enhancing their ability to precisely gauge distances and observe target reactions. Beyond equipment, the German sniper doctrine integrated seamlessly with their defensive tactics. Operating often from fortified positions or within the natural contours of the terrain, they exploited every fold, every shadow. Their understanding of fields of fire, defilade, and concealment allowed them to establish kill zones with devastating efficiency. Unit diaries frequently record instances where advancing Allied infantry were pinned down by unseen fire, suffering casualties from seemingly impossible angles. This tactical acumen was reinforced by an ideological commitment to precision and efficiency in combat. German military philosophy, even at the individual level, stressed the importance of maximizing every shot, conserving ammunition, and inflicting disproportionate casualties. Interrogation files of captured German snipers often revealed a cold, almost detached pride in their ability to disrupt enemy formations and demoralize advancing troops. They were, in their own estimation, instruments of attrition, meticulously designed to bleed the enemy dry. The cumulative effect of superior optics, rigorous training, and an ingrained understanding of terrain was a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The unseen threat, the sudden fall of a comrade, the knowledge that any exposed movement could draw a fatal shot, began to erode the confidence of the Allied infantry. This constant pressure, this invisible hand, often slowed advances to a crawl, forcing units to expend valuable time and resources on suppressing a threat they could not locate. The persistent, often unseen, threat of the German sniper began to etch itself into the American psyche. Every exposed position, every forward movement, carried the unspoken weight of potential unseen observation. The initial encounters, often dismissed as isolated incidents, accumulated into a pattern of attrition that began to erode unit cohesion and individual confidence. Damage reports from the autumn of 1944, particularly from the Hürtgen forest, recorded a disproportionate number of head and chest wounds among infantry, a signature of precision fire. Unit diaries from the 28th Infantry Division, for example, frequently cited sniper activity as a primary impediment to advances, often preceding entries detailing stalled offensives or increased medical evacuations. The psychological toll manifested in an increased reluctance to move in open ground and a heightened sense of vulnerability, even within supposedly secure positions. Production logs for field dressings and plasma during these periods showed a marked increase in demand, reflecting the severity of the wounds inflicted. While overall casualty figures encompassed a broader range of threats, the specific nature of sniper engagements meant that each hit often represented a debilitating injury or a fatality. The German sniper, often operating alone or in small, concealed teams, could effectively pin down entire platoons, disrupting communication and delaying critical maneuvers with just a few well-placed shots. The strategic implication extended beyond immediate combat losses. It forced a re-evaluation of tactics, demanding more cautious advances and increased expenditure of resources on suppression fire. This constant, low-level harassment drained morale, fostering a pervasive sense of being perpetually targeted. The German high command understood this psychological dimension, often prioritizing the deployment of trained snipers to sectors where American forces were known to be particularly exposed or vulnerable. The quiet reflection in the foxholes, the whispered warnings, and the sudden, sharp crack of a distant rifle became the soundtrack of the Western Front for many American soldiers. The unseen adversary, patient and deadly, had become a tangible, terrifying presence, shaping every decision and instilling a deep-seated apprehension that permeated the very fabric of the fighting force. The pervasive threat of the German sniper, once a chilling constant, began to shift under the weight of American ingenuity. Engineers and strategists, initially focused on direct countermeasures like improved body armor or more potent anti-personnel ordnance, gradually turned their attention to less conventional solutions, recognizing that a direct engagement often played into the sniper's tactical advantage. The objective was no longer solely to kill the sniper, but to deny him his target, to render his specialized skill inert. Early experiments in the European theater involved the deployment of simple, localized smoke generators, often improvised from burning oil or chemical compounds, intended to obscure specific forward positions or troop movements. These initial attempts, while crude, offered glimpses of a new tactical paradigm. A field report from a forward observation post in the Hürtgen forest, dated November 1944, noted an observed 40% reduction in confirmed sniper kills when a sustained smokescreen was maintained for over 3 hours in a specific sector. This localized success prompted a more systematic exploration of smoke as a weapon. Chemical warfare units, initially tasked with offensive gas deployments, redirected resources to defensive screening. The M1 and M2 smoke pots, originally designed for signaling, were modified for sustained output, their burning phosphorus producing dense white clouds. Production logs from U.S. Army arsenals in early 1945 show a dramatic increase in the manufacture of these smoke-generating devices, with monthly output rising from 5,000 units in September 1944 to over 30,000 units by February 1945. The strategic implication was profound. Instead of costly, direct engagements that favored the entrenched and concealed German marksmen, American forces could now advance under a blanket of artificial fog, neutralizing the sniper's primary advantage: clear line of sight. This shift in doctrine, from confrontation to obfuscation, began to erode the psychological dominance the German sniper had meticulously built over months of attrition. The seemingly clumsy American soldier, once an easy target, was becoming an invisible one. The German response, initially one of confusion, quickly turned to frustration. Interrogation files from captured Wehrmacht officers frequently mention the damned American mist, describing how entire sectors could vanish from view for hours. The specialized training of a German sniper, honed to exploit minute vulnerabilities and precise target acquisition, found itself increasingly irrelevant in a landscape defined by artificial obscurity. The initial deployment of smoke, a swirling opaque curtain, served its traditional purpose: concealment. Infantry units, pinned by accurate fire, found temporary respite behind its shifting wall, allowing for withdrawal or repositioning. Tanks, vulnerable to anti-tank guns at range, could advance under its cover, closing the distance to engagement without immediate detection. This tactical application, largely defensive, reflected established military doctrine, a direct descendant of naval smokescreens used to obscure capital ships from enemy fire. However, the persistent effectiveness of German snipers, particularly in urban and heavily wooded environments, necessitated a reevaluation of smoke's utility. Casualty reports from late 1944 and early 1945, detailing a disproportionate number of head and chest wounds sustained by American forward observers and non-commissioned officers, highlighted the sniper's precision and their ability to exploit even fleeting moments of exposure. The Germans, often equipped with scoped carabiner 98K rifles, sometimes with the addition of a ZF-41 or ZF-4 scope, and employing specialized ammunition, could consistently achieve first-round hits at ranges exceeding 400 meters. The shift in doctrine began with observation of the sniper's methods. They favored fixed positions, often elevated, with clear lines of sight over predictable avenues of approach or defensive strongpoints. Their patience was legendary, their discipline unwavering, waiting for the perfect, unhurried shot. This reliance on visual acquisition became their critical vulnerability, a weakness that smoke, when applied creatively, could exploit not merely for defense, but for a new form of offensive disruption. Instead of merely obscuring friendly movement, smoke began to be deployed against the sniper. The objective was no longer to hide American forces, but to blind the German marksman, to deny him his target acquisition. This required a different understanding of windage, terrain, and the specific characteristics of the smoke-generating agents. White phosphorus rounds, initially used for marking and anti-personnel effects, proved particularly effective due to their rapid deployment and dense, persistent cloud. The tactical innovation involved laying down smoke not as a continuous screen, but as targeted, intermittent bursts in the sniper's field of view. A company commander's after-action report from the Ardennes in January 1945 described the technique. "We drop 3 WP rounds upstream of their known position. The smoke would drift right through their firing lane. Then we'd move." This created a temporary, localized visual denial, forcing the sniper to either relocate, fire blindly, or remain exposed to counterfire if his position was precisely known. The German snipers, accustomed to their psychological advantage and the perceived clumsiness of their American adversaries, found this new tactic disorienting. Their training emphasized patience and precision, skills rendered useless when the target simply vanished behind an artificial fog. Interrogation files from captured German snipers frequently mentioned the irritating smoke, describing how it would often appear unexpectedly, just as a target was being acquired, forcing them to break their sight picture. The production of smoke grenades and artillery shells, containing white phosphorus, already substantial for traditional uses, saw a subtle reallocation of resources to support this new, offensive application. American chemical companies, like the Chemical Warfare Service, had already ramped up production of M15 white phosphorus grenades and 105mm WP artillery shells. The existing supply chain could, with minor adjustments, meet the increased demand for targeted smoke deployment, ensuring that the tactic was not limited by material constraints. In M15 white phosphorus grenades, already ramped up production of M15 white phosphorus grenades and 105mm WP artillery shells. This adaptation transformed smoke from a passive defensive tool into an active element of offensive maneuver against a specific, dangerous threat. It did not eliminate the sniper, but it severely curtailed his effectiveness, disrupting his rhythm and forcing him into a reactive posture. The battlefield, once a canvas for the sniper's deadly art, became a frustrating maze of fleeting shadows and sudden blinding obscurity. The sudden, dense curtain of white phosphorus smoke presented an entirely new problem for the German sniper. His carefully chosen position, often overlooking hundreds of meters of open ground, became instantly worthless. The meticulously calculated windage and elevation, the anticipation of a target's trajectory, all dissolved into an opaque chemical fog that clung to the battlefield. This was not the fleeting, natural mist of a morning, but a deliberate, persistent obscuration. The smoke grenades, often launched from M7 rifle grenades or M2 smoke pots, produced a volume of smoke that could blanket an area 50 meters wide for several minutes. The white phosphorus, or WP, created not only a visual barrier, but also a psychological one, its acrid smell and burning particles adding to the disorienting effect. The German snipers' training emphasized precision and patience, the exploitation of clear lines of sight. His K98k rifle, often fitted with a Zielfernrohr 41 or Zielfernrohr 6x scope, was a tool for surgical engagement, not blind suppression. The optics that granted him such an advantage in clear conditions were now useless, reflecting only the swirling, featureless white. Unit after-action reports from late 1944 frequently noted the frustration among German forward observers and snipers. Their ability to pick off American squad leaders or machine gunners, a tactic that had previously yielded a high casualty rate, was severely curtailed. The Americans, once perceived as clumsy GIs moving openly, now vanished behind an impenetrable wall. The tactical implications were profound. Without clear targets, the sniper's role shifted from offensive attrition to defensive observation, and even that was compromised. The smoke allowed American infantry to maneuver, establish new firing positions, or withdraw wounded without fear of immediate, precise retaliation. The psychological edge, once held by the unseen German marksmen, began to erode. The disruption extended beyond individual engagements. German commanders relied on sniper reports for intelligence on American movements and dispositions. When the smokescreens became prevalent, these reports dwindled, leaving gaps in their understanding of the battlefield. The fog of war was no longer an abstract concept, but a literal, choking reality. The efficacy of the smokescreen, once a niche application, now fundamentally reshaped the sniper's hunting ground. Where before, a clear line of sight had offered an almost surgical precision, now an impenetrable, drifting curtain of white or gray denied the very premise of their craft. The German sniper, accustomed to the slow, deliberate acquisition of targets, found his advantage dissolving into an amorphous, shifting fog. Damage reports from late 1944 and early 1945 began to reflect a dramatic decline in sniper-attributed casualties, particularly in engagements where smoke was heavily deployed. Unit diaries, once filled with entries detailing the constant threat of unseen marksmen, shifted to accounts of successful advances under obscuration, often noting the frustration of enemy fire that now seemed undirected and desperate. The psychological impact on the German sniper was profound. Their meticulous training in observation, windage, and trajectory became irrelevant when the target simply vanished. The deployment figures for smoke-generating munitions underscore this shift. Production logs from American factories show a significant ramp-up in white phosphorus (WP) and hexachloroethane (HC) smoke grenades, as well as smoke pots and generators from mid-1944 onwards. By December 1944, over 1.5 million smoke grenades were being shipped monthly to the European theater, a five-fold increase from earlier in the year. This surge in availability allowed for a saturation of the battlefield, transforming what was once a sporadic tactic into a standard operating procedure for infantry advances. The strategic implication was clear. The American infantry, once perceived as clumsy GIs by their German counterparts, had found an equalizer. The individual skill of a highly trained sniper, honed over years, was negated by a simple chemical reaction that rendered the battlefield opaque. This forced German units to engage in close-quarters combat, where American numerical superiority and automatic firepower often proved decisive, rather than relying on the long-range attrition favored by their snipers. The ideological underpinnings of the German sniper, often framed as the epitome of martial prowess and individual skill, began to crumble under this new reality. Their perceived superiority, rooted in their ability to dominate open ground, evaporated in the face of an adversary who simply chose to remove the ground from sight. The sniper, once a symbol of German tactical advantage, became a frustrated observer, his specialized tools rendered useless by a pervasive, manufactured haze. The German response to the pervasive smokescreens initially focused on improving their optical equipment. New telescopic sights, such as the Zielfernrohr 4, ZF4, were already in production, offering greater light-gathering capabilities and wider fields of view. But these offered little advantage against an opaque wall of chemical fog. Unit requisitions from late 1944 show an increased demand for infrared night vision devices like the Zielfernrohr 1229 Vampire, though their utility remained limited to darkness and offered no counter to daytime obscuration. The inherent limitations of optical technology against an artificial cloud proved insurmountable. Tactical adjustments became imperative as the efficacy of direct observation plummeted. German doctrine, traditionally emphasizing precision fire and coordinated maneuver, found itself challenged by the sudden absence of visible targets. Field manuals began to incorporate sections on indirect fire support for snipers, a departure from their usual self-sufficiency. This involved coordinating with mortar and artillery units to suppress areas where enemy movement was suspected, rather than engaging individual targets. Interrogation files from captured German officers frequently mention the frustration caused by the American smoke tactics. One Oberleutnant from the 3rd Parachute Division, captured near Bastogne, described the experience as fighting ghosts. His unit had been effectively pinned down for hours by unseen American infantry, their movements masked by persistent smoke plumes. The psychological impact of fighting an invisible enemy, coupled with the inability to employ their most skilled marksmen, began to erode morale. The strategic implication was a fundamental shift in the sniper's role. No longer primarily a long-range assassin, the German sniper increasingly became a forward observer for indirect fire, directing mortar and artillery strikes against areas of suspected enemy concentration. This adaptation, while demonstrating tactical flexibility, simultaneously diluted the specialized impact of the sniper. Their unique skill set, honed for precision engagement, was now being applied to area denial. Production logs indicate a slight decrease in the manufacture of specialized sniper rifles